Hello, this is Gray's Aquatics. I'm here today to try and convince you to get CO2 for your planted tanks. I know many of you are already aware of CO2. You know which plants are low tech or don't need CO2 and which ones do need CO2. And you've probably made an art of not getting into CO2 because of the expense. I'm going to try and convince you, or at least show you that it's not very hard. It's just a matter of spending the money. What you're looking at now is just some Madeca fry that I took in from the cold. They've been growing out for about a week here. Yeah, I'm going to move the rest of them in. Eventually, I've got about 4 tanks here that are just cycling right now. But anyway, onto the CO2. So a lot of people like to buy CO2 from the cheaper suppliers. I actually prefer CO2 Art. There's the box. Yeah, I find them to be a good brand. I basically wanted to show you, this is what you buy when you get CO2. It's a regulator. It is the expensive part. You can get, so this is what you're going to spend $300 on, or whatever it is right now. I mean, that was pre-COVID, but this is the part that it's important because your fish's safety depends on this. Some of the cheaper models, they can work fine for a while, they can work fine forever, but one day it'll just stop working. And CO2 Art is regarded as the best in my book. So, you know, why not just spend your money on the best and have a better experience with CO2. So yeah, that's $300. A cylinder, this is only like a 2.2 kilo cylinder. That'll cost about, I'd say, $100, and they'll ship it to you. Go to Keg King or any of the online barbecue suppliers. People use them to make lemonade, whatever. And CO2 itself is pretty cheap. I mean, it's only like $25, $28 or whatever to refill the cylinder once it's empty. I like to use cylinders that are as big as possible, because that means I don't have to refill it as often. Yeah, as long as it'll fit under your tank or behind your tank, yeah, go as big as possible, I would say. But these little 2 kilogram cylinders, they're pretty good. Yeah, I'd only replace them maybe twice a year when you run out of CO2. So basically, I just wanted to show you how I attach this part to your CO2 bottle. First up, whoever you're buying off, you should make sure they've got the right thread type for your region. So if you just email the people at CO2 Art, they will tell you. Or they've got a thing on their website where you just pick your region and it'll tell you which one that you need. It's all because the US, do things differently, and they do things in inches. Anyway, so this screws onto your CO2 bottle. Very simply like that. A shifter or a spanner is what I'd use for this normally, but today I can't find my shifter, so I'm using multi-grips. So it's just a matter of turning this. I was worried that multi-grips might damage it a bit, but it's not. It appears to be fine. So, as you can see, it's technically not very hard. Oh. Most people will be able to manage this okay. So yeah, just turning a thread. Okay, whoa, cool, that's done. Next, we open our valve. That will give us pressure in here. So that'll move the CO2 that's in the cylinder into my regulator. Then we take this mix of dish soap and water and we pour it over the CO2 reg. So just in the gaps there. And what this does is it just makes it easy to see if there are any leaks anywhere. You'll see bubbles. And it looks good. There doesn't appear to be any leaks. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so now what I've done is I've moved our CO2 cylinder over to underneath the fish tank stand, and I've added some cable ties to secure the cylinder to the stand. And the reason you want to do this is you've got this expensive reg on top of a tall cylinder that can easily be knocked over, and you don't want your reg smashing into a million pieces. So we want it secure. You always want your CO2 bottle to be standing upright. They do not work, it's not recommended to put them on their sides, so just don't do it. Believe me, it's a recipe for unhappiness. So what I've got here is just some water in a syringe, and I'm just going to fill up our drop checker. A drop checker, oh actually it's not a drop checker, it is a bubble counter. So as the name describes, this device, when it has CO2 going through it, will produce bubbles, and that will allow you to count how many bubbles of CO2 are going through per minute, or at least you can work that out by counting how many are going through in 10 seconds and timesing that by 6, which is what most people do. What matters is the final amount of CO2 that's going in the tank. And with most drop checkers, it's green, blue, yellow sort of system, where if it's blue, you've got no CO2. If it's yellow, you're killing fish. But if it's green, that's about right. And we always aim to have a green drop checker here. What I've got here is a bit of CO2 tubing. It's different from just normal airline tubing. So don't get tempted to use normal airline tubing because that will corrode. CO2 is actually a bit corrosive. So it's just a simple matter of threading on this part. Screwing this back on now that it's filled with water. Then placing this over the end, keeping everything nice and tight, and then just locking it on with this final piece. So the reason we pay so much for this regulator, basically all it does is turn it on and off. It allows us to put CO2 on a timer. So basically, when the timer says to, CO2 will bubble through, and we want the timer to say, come on about 2 hours before our lights come on. And that will dose the tank with a nice amount of CO2 by the time the lights come on. The plants can use it when the lights come on, and then about 2 hours before the lights are going to go off, the CO2 cuts out, and the plants still have enough CO2 in the water to make a good day's growing. Hello, I just wanted to give you a better view of the electrical cord that we stuck in the bottom here. This goes to a plug which is attached to a timer like this and lives there. But yeah, and yeah, these timers are quite cheap, but they're good. You can find them at Bunnings. So yeah, using that, we can turn our CO2 on 2 hours before the lights come on and 2 hours before the lights come off. And I light my tanks for 6 hours a day. So that's that part. As you can see, you can count the bubbles here. But it's a useful tool. You can see this part here is what you touch to change the rate of CO2. Some people worry about the working pressure, this gauge here, but basically as long as you can control the amount of CO2 that's going through easily, you pretty much don't have to worry about that. But most people like to keep the working pressure between 30, at least above 30 to 50 psi. But yeah, I'm just gonna set it at a rate of, let's say a couple of drops a second, because I don't actually know how much CO2 I'll need to make our tank saturated with enough CO2. Now you've got a couple of options when it comes to putting CO2 into a tank. You can use a diffuser. A diffuser is basically a ceramic pipe. So you'd run this you'd run this tube into a diffuser like this. It's a ceramic pipe and it'll just basically make tiny bubbles. Here's a diffuser here in the bottom of my Kmart tank there. And the way you'd monitor how much CO2 you have is with a drop checker. You can't really see that well right now because the light's not on yet. But the other option that you have is you can run your tubing into a CO2 reactor. And that's what I've got here. Now, this uses less CO2, and the reason that's beneficial is the larger tank you have, the more CO2 you're going to use. And when you're using a lot of CO2, it's just a pain in the ass because you've got to change you've got to refill your tank, which means going to a barbecue supply place and paying, $28 to fill it up with more CO2. It's not a big deal financially, it's just an effort thing. So I'd rather use less CO2 and use a CO2 reactor. They work pretty simply. Here we've got a fluval canister filter, and if you have a look at, instead of going back into our tank, the hose goes into our CO2 reactor. It goes into the chamber where it mixes with our CO2 that's being added by this tube here, and then gets pumped out to the tank above. I've got a valve here. It's important to use CO2 graded valves and not airline valves. But in any case, the water gets pumped back up to the tank, and yeah, it will have CO2 dissolved into it. There are a lot of different ways of measuring CO2, but in reality, most hobbyists just use a drop checker, which, like this. And I'll give you a look at that with the tank lights turned on. But basically, if it's blue, there's no CO2. If it's yellow, you're killing fish. And if it's green in the middle, that means that that's probably the right amount of CO2. Okay, bye for now. And through the magic of editing, we're back with the lights turned on. Here is our CO2 diffuser. Now, as I said, use more CO2 this way because, as you can see, it goes up to the surface. It's best to angle your filter or impeller pumps or whatever to kind of push the CO2 around the tank instead of letting it go straight to the surface. And as I said, diffusers, they work and they're good. Maybe they need a bit more maintenance than a reactor because you've got to clean them every now and again. They block up and you just soak them in a solution of bleach and water. Here is our drop checker. Let's have a look at the color of that. Yeah, I'd say it's yellowish green, which means it's getting enough CO2, and actually that's probably a good level for it to be in. So the reason for using CO2 in this tank is I just want to grow this carpet really fast. This is dwarf hairgrass, the short kind. I think a bit of AR Mini in the corner. But yeah, just a Kmart tank, and it should make a pretty good, better tank once it's grown in. And yeah, that'll be nice. So that's all I've got for you now. I'll be setting up the tank behind it next with crips and some pygmy chainsaws. But until then, thank you for watching.